Fried rice is, by default, a staple of numerous cultures. Composed of numerous cheap, run-of-the-mill ingredients, it is an age-old classic. Unlike my previous pizza video, it is a dish that cannot be directly tagged with a singular culture. Sure, it may have a definitive origin, China, but the dish circulated around the continent of Asia for a great long time prior to its touchdown in America. Fried rice originated in the city Yangzhou because of what has been repeatedly stated throughout history as Emperor Yang's, ruler during the Sui dynasty, overbearing demands. Not only did he love the dish, but its creation actually fueled a practical purpose. It was made with the use of leftover rice, rather than freshly cooked, meaning that two separate entrees on two separate occasions could be made out of one batch. Not just that, but it could also be paired with anything, using soy sauce, a food preservation and fermentation device turned liquid gold. As a binder, any tangible scraps could actually be tossed right into the flame. And though my previous statement may hold true, a Chinese bowl of fried rice does contain just a particular few designated base ingredients. Some sources of protein, rice, and vegetables. The ingredients were stir fried all together in the most practical way possible, in a piping hot wok. The wok has thrived as a vital tool in a wide array of dishes, tracing back to a high level of maximized efficiency, easy for tossing ingredients with its protruding handle, conducts heat as high as 500 Fahrenheit, which itself emits a smoky aroma, encasing any substance placed inside its borders. Those raised edges truly are a game changer, as it also permits an even cooked across all surfaces. Though its history is slightly foggy, the arrival in China can be tagged as between the 10th and 13th century. It is considered that the invention was borrowed from India, as many other utensils and ingredients have evidently been exchanged between the two countries. Sure, the dish has a discernible origin, but it was at no point ever simply grounded to one location. Dozens upon dozens of variations emerged into public light, all being met with happy faces and hungry stomachs. Looking at Chinese variations first, Yangzhou, a more rich and nutrient-dense incarnate, including charred pork and shrimp. Hokkien, a seafood variation with some gravy pot at the top. Moving on, just to provide an explanation for how the dish actually spread, Chinese migrators after the 10th century began to actively migrate throughout Asia. And the dish's permeable convenience seeped through by both pursued trade and naturally recognized ease. Chahahan, a Japanese variant, kimchi bokkeumbap, sorry if I mispronounced that, a Korean kind, and many, many more. In the 19th century, China was a mere shard of its former dominant dynastic past. In 1839, upon the Qing government's attempt to thwart the deadly opium trade valve, an attempt which resulted in tens of thousands of cartons worth of opium being confiscated, Britain sent over a naval fleet to impose their will, and a series of battles fought overseas broke out. Standing a full head above the already tattered China technologically, Britain won each battle decisively, culminating with the installation of the Treaty of Nanking, which forced China to give up Hong Kong Island and also demanded that they open multiple ports, completely open 24/7 for British interest. This stream of foreign land imposing their will upon China carried on for decades, with numerous other parties such as France evolving themselves, and the original Institute document being countlessly tweaked and adjusted to better align with their accelerating demands and new country policies. By 1860, the Second Opium War concluded, with the opium trade being entirely legal and the greater quantity of trading ports being surrendered to other nations. What stemmed from a place of courage and a yearning for representing their peoples spurred a full political deconstruction and then reassembly in another country's image. China tried to be brave, and it just totally backfired on them. During the period of the mid to late 19th century, Chinese people were ridden with famine and poverty. However, word caught of an escape. At a sawmill in Coloma, California, traces of gold were found in a bordering river. Internationally, people went crazy. Their prospect of true wealth hinged upon nothing but focused persistence. For the relatively simple task of just panning for gold, millions of Chinese recognized this is a better time than ever, flocked to California at not just the looming gold rush, obviously a global hit, but also to claim more sustainable jobs and positions, like in factories or farming. Along those same lines, many took to America with the goal of freedom to practice their very own beliefs and customs. The arrival of the Chinese in such a massive group actually left a profound impact in America, already going through an extreme period of change. Quite notably, over a period of 4 years, over 10,000 Chinese immigrants constructed the western section of the Transcontinental Railroad in full. Other Chinese worked in factories, and as I mentioned earlier, some went to farming. Their drive persistence was a benefit reaped by the entirety of our country. However, despite this evident impact, and influence. As more Chinese began to follow through a country's gates, America determined that the Chinese could not purchase land. Therefore, just in immediate response, each worker settled in a nearby city where many would find their very own local businesses or restaurants with just a little taste of home. As for the businesses that were entirely rooted in culture, in order to rake in a profit, their values and customs could not be transferred just intact. Dishes and ingredients were tweaked to best appeal to the palates of born American citizens. Not everything was done for the purpose of fitting in / economic gain. However, many used cooking as an outlet and a way of still feeling connected to home. So in that instance, the culture was left majorly pure. The first restaurants were established around 1850, but a lack of photographic / meticulous record keeping prevents us from actually narrowing down to a particular location. The ingredients during this period were quite dull: soy sauce, sesame oil, cabbage, but with proper grace and technique, these restaurants were able to put out new varieties of classified Chinese food. Leading back into the prompt that I gave you earlier, it makes total sense that fried rice would have traveled over the American border with the Chinese, given the primary philosophy that I established earlier. The philosophy of fried rice was scratching together scraps and producing a tasty, zero-waste meal, without a given set of ingredients outside of a couple very general food groups. Why wouldn't it be among this just kept in utility belt? It's easier for both the Chinese to cook, and it's easier for both the Americans and Chinese together to eat in unison. Some of the American tweaks to fried rice are a bit more subtle than you may expect, but nevertheless, they have a great impact on the final product. One of the most notable changes in terms of ingredients to note is found in the name itself: rice. A mid to long grain is often used in China, which, when left to sit overnight and only then transferred in sizzling hot wok, makes for a more crispy exterior while still retaining moisture inside, keeping it fluffy and light. However, American restaurants often opt for the usage of a completely long grain, the most accessible option monetarily. This sort of rice is very high in starch content, meaning that it clumps together while cooking. Another change that can likely be observed in any restaurant that you ever go to here in America is the mix of vegetables cooked with the rice. Here, upon a platter of fried rice being served before you, seeing peas, carrots, and peppers should not be shock. Their inclusion comes from a place of looking to uphold the philosophy of no waste, which individually isn't something that should be scored down upon. The only situation where it may transform itself into an issue is when it's passed off as authentic Chinese cooking. Traditional fried rice often includes bok choy, shallot, mushrooms, among others. Vegetables that are actually, native to the Chinese environment.